The fact that someone in a suit in DC says, I don't want some kid in Arizona to know who Plutarch is, that should be enough to fire you up to get you to read Plutarch.
You are listening to And If Love Remains, a unique show spotlighting people, ideas, science, culture, and art. Your host, Mike Lovett.
Got that right, Rachel. You are listening to that great podcast in the sky, And If Love Remains. I am your host, Mike Levitt, and we have the King of Liberty, who I like to call
the King.
Which I find ironic.
Oxymoron, yeah, exactly.
Right? The teacher of liberty, the man, the machine. I love having this guy on, Joe Wolverton, Dr. Joe Wolverton. Welcome to the show. Glad to have you back on.
Man, this is my favorite podcast to do. It's really, honestly, hand to heaven, the only podcast where I can say everything I really think. When I'm in the gulag, they're going to point to this as the reason.
And I'll be in there with you,
right? When I'm in the orange jumpsuit down in Guantanamo, and I'm like, "Hey, why did y'all do this?" And they're like, "Come on, man, we saw the podcast. Come on."
Right. We listen. No, we listen to End of Love Remains with everybody else.
We do. I have to tell you, you're talking about the machine. Have you ever seen that Bert Kreischer thing about the Russian mob and the machine?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Well, the funny thing is that I actually had a run-in, not with the Russian mob, but with the Russian army. It's when I was a kid and we went to a Boy Scout camp, and we went to Boy Scout camp in East Germany.
Oh,
now,
okay.
This is 1986, 87. I can't remember exactly. And so it's one of those things. It's like, it's no one today can understand. It was and my father's job made it really tricky because I had a special passport. It made it tricky, right? The instant someone who knew it, your average run of the mill, East German soldier's not going to know the difference. It's a blue passport. You're American, whatever.
Right.
But it was tricky for me and to get places. And so anyway, we finally, the East German army comes on the train at the border. But now, there's two borders because West Berlin belonged to us and to the French and to the British and to the Russians. And so anyway, or to the British, Russians, and to us. Anyway, long story short, we get to French, British, and us. The Russians owned East Berlin. And when we get there to East Germany, out in the forest of East Germany, a couple of my friends and I are like, let's go exploring at night when we're supposed to be asleep in our tent. And it seemed like a great idea. And then we literally get arrested by East German soldiers. We get taken to a holding facility and held until their Russian overlords show up. And so they're freaking out at the camp because it becomes daylight and we're nowhere to be found.
Oh, man.
I mean, they finally, and there are no cell phones. You got to realize this is like,
yeah.
And so who do we call? I'm not fixing to call my mom or dad and say, hey, guess what I did?
Right. Can you come bail me out of East Germany?
My dad, that would have lost him his job. And so,
man.
And so I'm just like, and so finally, long story short, but every time I think, when you say that, the machine, I think that guy has that story about the Russian mob. And I was literally like detained by the Russian army.
Oh my gosh. Germany. That's insane. What a great story. I mean, now
it was insane. Story. Now all's well that ends well. And we ended up, as the day wore on, that we were able to communicate with the rest. The East Germans couldn't speak English. The Russian guy, the highest ranking Russian guy, could speak English pretty well. We were able to tell him who we were, that we weren't, we weren't up to no good. We were just genuinely
don't mind these uniforms, sir.
Yeah, that's a Boy Scout uniform, man. And so, but we weren't even in uniform. We were just, dressed like, because you were supposed to be going to sleep, and
you were just in all black. I mean, come on.
Yeah, right. we took some charcoal.
Right.
No, but it's just funny when you said that. It made me think of that guy's story about the Russian mob, and then I'm like, I got arrested by the Russian army. It's pretty cool.
Oh,
But I mean, it's
that
cool
is
now. It's cool now.
right. It's definitely that's definitely one of those two truths and a lie stories that you
I know I have this friend and she's like, dude, you own two truths and a lie. You've had the
right.
most bizarre life ever. And I'm like, yeah, I just need to play it more often for money.
Right. You know what? I gotta tell you, telling that story makes me think of the how quickly things change. Because like my
Yeah.
kids, they don't have a clue of what we're even talking about when we talk about East Germany or the Berlin
Mm-mm.
Wall or
No.
the how many servicemen served over the
Oh yeah.
course of the Cold War and all
Yeah.
that stuff. And I think about that 1989 Berlin Wall
Hmm.
incident and
Hmm.
um and how that all went down and it it turns out like after all is said and done, it was a bunch of like East Berlin partiers that misunderstood an order and just said no, didn't take no for an answer. They just said we're coming through, and that's
Yeah.
what broke down the wall. It was people say it was Reagan and Gorbachev and all this stuff, and there was definitely things that led
Right.
to that
Yeah.
moment, but it
Yeah.
was ultimately it was the people that just said, you guys, no, we're not taking it
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah, the weird thing about, that wall was such an important thing in growing up. Growing up, I grew up in Western Europe, uh, most of the time in Frankfurt, Germany. And I was telling a group of kids yesterday that, we were studying Trenchard and Gordon, where they say, act honestly and boldly for liberty, or forget its glorious and charming sound. And I said, that word sound is interesting. What sound does liberty have? I said, what sound liberty has? Silence. That's the sound of liberty, is silence. Because when I was a kid growing up in Europe, every day when a jet would fly over, just every one of my friends, we would look up to make sure it wasn't Russian. I mean, we literally thought, if that's Russian, we're dead. And we would
Wow.
look up, and we all knew how to identify. I mean, can you imagine? A bunch of 16-year-old kids, we knew a MiG from an F-16. You shouldn't know that. I hope my children never know the difference. But we would be in school, and at least during my 4 years of high school, I would say 4, maybe 5 times, uh, terrorists bombed our school complex. And so you hear that go off and okay, it's time to, we have to react. I would go out in the morning to get in the car to drive to school once I got my license, and my mom would stand at the door and say, "Don't forget to check under your car." Because I have to check under my car for a bomb, because if someone clocked me as an American, And so the sound of liberty is silence. And the kids, and we would literally hear something unusual in the air, and we'd look up to make sure there was no, missile. And we had air raid drills at school regularly. Like I say, we had several terrorist attacks at our school. I went to school with the daughters of Colin Powell. They were my friends. His two daughters were my same age as me, and they were friends of mine. And we were at his office having lunch when he was the commanding officer of Fifth Corps in Europe. We were having lunch, and the alarm goes. They bombed the building,
Wow.
and so it's like, when I think of these kids today have no concept, and I'm happy they have no concept.
Right.
I'm happy, but I'm also, and I told these kids, the point of that story is not just to point out how blessed you are to know. I said, what wakes you up in the morning? And she's like, my mom's saying it's time to get up. Well, we have roosters and they wake us up because there's some farm kids in the group. And I'm like, that's so much better than your mom saying, don't forget to check under the car for bombs.
Right.
You know,
Yeah,
it's
for
so much
sure.
better. And I said, the point that Trenchard and Gordon made is that, that's liberty. We purchased that on an installment plan, and we have missed a lot of payments, and it's being repoed, man.
Yeah.
And we've missed a lot of payments, and it's time we start paying. And so I I think about that. You saying your kids know nothing of it. I'm so happy they don't. But we gotta do some heavy lifting, or they one day they'll know worse than that.
Right. And I'm really proud and happy to announce and talk about some of the things that you're doing right now in that great cause. One of the organizations that has been around for decades. I don't know how long it's been around, but longer than my lifetime for sure.
Yeah,
Has
65
been
years. Yeah,
65 years. Yeah, so a whole lot longer than my
yeah, right.
lifetime.
Exactly. So much longer.
So much longer. No, but is the John Birch Society, and they are an amazing organization. They've always been, at the forefront of liberty issues. Sometimes they kind of go under the radar, but man, they're I think that they have always done great work, and they've always been true to a lot of great principles. And you've been a contributor to their magazine, The New American, for a long time. And I think you have some new news about that you've taken on a new role with them. Is that right?
Yeah, I've been writing for the New American since 2004. Yeah, so 20 years. And so recently they asked me to rewrite some scripts that they're using for a couple of video series they use, one about a constitutional convention under Article 5, and one basically an intro to the Constitution, the principles upon which it is founded, called The Constitution is the Solution. And so that we're redoing those things. And so they brought me up to their headquarters to film those for a week. It took 4 hours. They thought it was going to take a week, but it took 4 hours. But yeah, it's funny you talk about how long they've been around, because it makes me think, in the town where I was born, Osceola, Arkansas. There used to be this giant, it's right outside of Memphis, right? It's in the Memphis metro area. And there used to be this giant "Get Us Out of the UN" billboard, right? Which was one of the John Birch Society's big programs. It still is,
Right.
but it was once huge.
Right.
And so it was right outside my hometown. It's not there anymore, but the doctor who delivered me was the head of the JBS in that area. And so literally the first mortal hands that touched me were John Birch Society hands. And I just, my parents knew people who were big into that, and so I was exposed to it as very young. And then when I went to college, I really got into it. And yeah, so anyway, when I was up there, they ended up having a meeting with me, and I didn't know this was going on. I was innocent. I was just doing whatever. I was there. They put me up in a hotel for a week. And anyway, at the end of the week, they held a big meeting and informed me that they had created a job for me, a full-time employment position, and they have named me their constitutional law scholar. And they've never had that before. And the for me, Mike, and I know that you have history with the JBS as well. For an organization like that to say that you're our point man for the Constitution is huge.
Yes.
That honor, I can't. It's inexplicable honor, to say, "Hey, you're the guy." And so they brought me on with the constitutional law scholar, and they created a think tank. And they're like, "Let's let's tighten everything up. Let's make sure everything we do is more constitutionally sound, more just correct historically and constitutionally. Bring younger people in. Let's get on Instagram. Let's get on TikTok, and let's expand this, but let's tighten up everything." And so, yeah, the big news is being officially employed by the John Birch Society as their constitutional law scholar. And I'm so proud of the organization, because if you go there and you know I've had people say to me since announcing this, they're like, "Well, you don't agree with everything the John Birch Society says." And that's true, but I also don't agree with everything I say. So,
Right.
there are times when I say something like, "Did I just say that rubbish out loud?" So, but there are so many things that I do agree with, and to their credit, they give me, I'm off the leash with them. They're just like, you just run free. And they hired me to do the thing I do, which is to familiarize people with not only the text of the Constitution, the meaning of the text, the the sources from which our founding fathers drew those principles, and do that stuff that I do that no one else does. And that's the great thing. There's just that vacuum there, and we can fill it. And if you're, and look, they don't pay. It's like the publisher the other day. He's like, "Hey, I put that video up, and he's like, "Hey, we got some people joining the society that mentioned that they saw you make a video," and I'm like, "That's awesome." And he's like, "We're gonna hire you to be a whatever." I forgot what the title they use for their like area recruiting guys.
Right.
And I'm like, "Yeah, I would be rubbish at that," but he the point is, I don't get paid for that, and they don't care if I don't bring anybody in. But for people that watch your show, I know that they would find somewhere to fit in. And not only that, I mean, the arsenal of the John Birch Society is enormous. There are weapons in there for any cause, whatever your personal thing is: freedom of religion, immigration, freedom, state sovereignty, the Fourth Amendment, whatever your thing is, they have weapons in their arsenal for you to use. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, there are so many leadership opportunities because so many people want to join, but so few people want to lead. And so if you're a person who thinks I could be a good leader, and you are persistent and consistent, you'll find leadership opportunities granted to you by the John Birch Society. And I mean, I met a guy when I was up there. They had these people come in and meet me, and I would sign. They had copies of my book, and I would sign it. And they were, gosh, one of them's like, I was a month ago, I joined the John Birch Society, and now I'm on the staff as one of their regional whatever. Because when they see that you're consistent and persistent, they promote you because they want that kind of person. Because a lot of people join and do nothing.
Right.
And so they want consistency and persist. And this guy was like, I'm just amazed that all I had to do was be true to this. And like I say, you don't go, at least me, I don't join thinking, well, this is a clone of my brain. What I do is I say, I'm going to, and the reason I ultimately ever did join is because I said, okay, this is who I am. I want resources. And these
Right.
guys, like you say, they're 65 years doing this. And Mike, I was up there at their headquarters, and one of the ladies who's also from Memphis who works for them, she's like, you got to go down to their library and check it out. And I did. And brother, I mean, it's amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
just the material that I have a database of how many books I own, and it's like at 2,000. Dude, that wouldn't take up a shelf in their library. I mean, it's massive, and it's every subject you can imagine, and books back from, the 1920s going forward, and just powerful. And this is the thing. It's like they are so willing to share that information. It's just a matter of people need to understand the John Birch Society, whatever you think of it, why don't you let it merit its own reputation with you? If you are someone who values the Constitution, or someone who's a libertarian, even an anarchist, they just produced a what they call bookazine. It's a standalone sort of, how you'll go to like Walgreens and the magazine section, and it'll have those Time Magazine presents the founding fathers, that kind of thing, right? So they've produced one on self-reliance. And it's just, and I wrote one of the articles. I wrote, of course, in my wheelhouse, the founding fathers and what they believed about self-reliance. But there's so many like real world applications that are there. You can even buy it today. It doesn't go on sale in the bookshops and everything until December. But if you go to like
You can.
thenewamerican.com/, shop or store. I can't remember which one it is. But if you go to thenewamerican.com and click on store, it's available there. And that's like the thing that I'm saying. And they'll have underneath there, you might like these titles as well. So it's not just, it isn't, I think it gets the rap of being conservative Republican organization. And there are conservative Republicans who are parts of it. But then there's people like me, and you and
Right.
other people who are much more uh free thinking than that, let's say.
Right. Yeah.
But again, the 10th Amendment section in their library is enormous,
Well, see,
you
and I
know.
think that's one of the great, benefits of the John Birch Society that I've experienced. I had a short stint with them when I was in high school. But the what I experienced was nothing but just like knowledge. Like they were a knowledge base,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
they were an information source. And if I had a question about something, I could always go to those resources, to those people, and they always had answers. And I think it's such a valuable thing to like you said, anybody who has who's part of the freedom movement, a part of the
yeah.
liberty movement, can benefit from the resources that the John Birch Society has.
Yeah, and
Um,
you can join any, I mean, it's like I said in the video where I announced it on YouTube. It's like you can join any organ, who cares? Join them all.
right,
Right? Why would you it's like if you're in a war, which I believe we are, if you're in a war and you've got allies offering you weapons, you use them. You don't sit down with the allies and discuss philosophy. And you say, "Well, I noticed that you guys have this policy and we disagree." No, if they're saying, "Here, have these weapons for your war," why wouldn't you use them? You
right,
don't sit down, if someone, the old analogy by one of my mentors, Hugh Nibley, is like if someone hands you a diamond and says, "Hey, this is a diamond," you're not gonna say, "Okay, well, let's sit down, let me do a background check on you. Let me discuss what you think about these religious principles." No, you're gonna take that diamond to a gemologist. If it's a diamond, you don't care that guy's background, right?
right,
You're grateful to have the diamond, and so to me, there are those people who treat the John Birch Society, and the John Birch Society offers this diamond, and they say, well, we don't agree with your stance on X." Dude, take the weapons. Who cares? There will come a time when we've defeated these enemies of ours, the enemies of liberty. There will come a time when all of us who fought together can sit down and say, now let's talk philosophically about X or Y or Z. That time isn't now, right?
right.
Like, I used to, when I was in law school, I worked for this ecumenical council, and we were fighting pornography. And it was me, representing the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It was Baptists and Lutherans and Presbyterians and Catholics and Muslims and all these people. We worked together, and no one ever sat there and said, I don't agree with your concept of the Trinity. No one did that,
Right.
because it's irrelevant when it comes to fighting pornography. There will come a day when we can have all those discussions. So anybody in the liberty movement, anybody who's wants to see the needle move toward individual liberty, I would say the John Birch Society is your best source, not only for information, for education, but also your best avenue toward leadership opportunities, which isn't that what you want? At the end of the day, don't we all want to be influencers, so to speak? Not social media influencers, but opinion makers. We want to be shot callers, right? We all want to be shot callers. And so I think the opportunity to do that with the John Birch site and just the overwhelming amount of material. I'm writing this book for them on Article 5, and one of their research guys the other night just blew me up with so much material that I needed in part that I was writing, and had it at fingertips, stuff from the 50s and 60s that I wouldn't have been able to find on my own through a Google search. It would
Right.
have taken it'd be like finding, a needle in a haystack. But this guy, that's what he does. He goes down to the library, takes pictures of it all, sends it to me, and boom, it's done. And you can
You
do
know,
that with anything.
Let's go there for a second, because they brought you on really to talk about, to as you said, tighten things up as far as
Yeah.
constitutional issues, and
Yeah.
make sure that you know bring your expertise to that table.
Right.
And so it's funny here, a little inside information for those who are listening. Joey and I are good friends, and so like our pre-show game is more like, hey, what's up, and
Yeah.
so we have no idea what we're going to talk about for the most part. But hey, let's go there. Talk about Article 5. Like, why? I know that there are many in the conservative movement that think like a convention of states would be a good idea, led by guys like Mark Levin and people like that.
Mhm.
And I know a lot of people, think that would be a good idea. Um, Tell me the counter to that. What is, what are the dangers, and why should we avoid, doing an Article 5 convention?
Right. Well, the first reason is they are uncontrollable. A convention of the people, a convention of states, it's uncontrollable because if you're looking in Article 5, the thing that the groups that support it never point out is they talk about how safe they are. Well, there are no rules. So, can you imagine if we call a convention of the states, can you imagine the delegates that New York and California might send? Because look, there are no rules. There's nothing that says you have to be a citizen. These states can decide, but
Well,
state like
it, and even if there were rules, I mean, we have experience with that with with the Articles of Confederation. I mean, they
well,
weren't
right,
supposed to.
that's right, and that's what I was gonna get to next, but you
Yeah,
imagine sitting there in New York says, "Okay, we want George Soros and Hillary
yeah,
Clinton sitting at that table."
right,
There's nothing you and I can do it nothing we can do about that. Nothing COS. Gavin Newsom wants a convention of the states to abolish the Second Amendment as far as the right of an individual to keep and bear arms. Now, look, there's nothing anybody could do to keep Gavin Newsom from that table. What about Bill Gates, who wants to vaccinate the world and who wants to sterilize the third world? There's literally nothing anyone could do to keep him from sitting at that table. And people, it astounds me that conservatives, principally, they recognize the undue influence of of Soros and Bill Gates, and they're constantly warning about it. But then they support an Article 5 convention. Like, guys, those two individuals are not going to sit back and not have a hand in rewriting the American Constitution. There's no
right,
way.
right.
Because I remember speaking at the UN in 2011. I was the only, or 12. I was the only person speaking at that. You've seen that picture of the UN where people, I'm standing there. I'm the only guy speaking in favor of an individual right to keep and bear arms. And you get the guy from Peru, the ambassador from Peru, who says, or Peru, Spain, who says the only thing standing between global disarmament is the American Second Amendment. He's like, once we get rid of that, it'll be so much easier. And so, in my mind, that says, well, there's a lot of people who agree with that, and nothing can stop them. There's nothing. If you're going to be bound by the Constitution, man, you got to be bound. You can't be, as my grandma used to say, you can't be pig and puppy. If you're going to waller in the mud, you can't get in my lap and be petted.
Right.
And so, if you're going to say the Constitution is the thing, that's fair enough. But the Constitution has no rules. Now, getting to even if there were rules, right? We had a capital C Constitution before the one we have now, and COS is so funny. They never called it the Constitution. Literally hundreds of references to them calling the Articles of Confederation the Constitution because it was. And you look at February, if you want to write this down out there, for those of you in Rio Linda, if you want to write this down, February 21st, 1787, Congress says, okay, things have gotten, people in Congress have made a motion to have a convention of the states. Let's do this. But we're going to set some rules. You are only allowed, and the only authority you have at this convention is to recommend alterations to the Articles of Confederation. You send those recommendations to Congress, and whatever we approve, we'll send to the states, and whatever they approve, if all of them approve as the articles required, then they become part of the Articles of Confederation. Simple as bada boom, bada bing. They had a method for amending that Constitution. Literally day one, Mike, Edmund Randolph stands up and throws the bloody rules just out the window. First thing they did was say, "Okay, let's keep everything secret." Well, that's great,
Right.
right? Everybody knows if politicians are gonna sit down and do something in secret, nothing bad could happen. So the
Right.
first rule is secrecy, which Thomas Jefferson wrote. James Madison says, "That troubles me a bit." You know what? You guys doing that? That's a little red flag, as the kids would say, right? Red flag, Jimmy, doing it all in secret. And then it's like, the governor of Virginia, and to be transparent, James Madison wrote it. The governor of Virginia stands up and says, "Here's our plan, a 16-point plan, completely abolishing the Articles of Federation, replacing it with an entirely new constitution, an entirely new form of government, and then moving the goalpost and saying, yeah, and instead of all 13 states having to agree, how about 9? Moving the guys, if you do, and so when the COS, the Convention of States people, they often say the Convention of 1787 was not a runaway convention. It certainly was. It certainly was. And I wrote an article, Mike. If y'all want to go to the New American and search Convention of States, they'll have a hashtag at the bottom. And if you click on that hashtag, you can see all the articles I've written on the subject, which is thousands of articles. And one of the things that I wrote very recently is how Gouverneur Morris said the thing everybody was thinking, but he said it out loud near the end of the convention, because people were saying, well, when we send this out to the states, Congress is never going to approve this. And Gouverneur Morris said, shh, shh, shh. We're above Congress. We're above the Articles of Confederation. This convention is above all of that and has nothing to do with that, and we can do whatever we want. And as long as the states approve it the way we say, Congress can stuff it because we're going to replace them anyway.
Right.
He said the silent part out loud, Mike. And I wrote, and that's the thing. It's like, why? And again, all that risk, it's beyond risk. It's like, all you have to do is look at history. History is, prelude, right?
Right.
And so you look at that history and you know that will happen. You know people like Bill Gates and George Soros and Gavin Newsom and Hillary Clinton, all of them will be involved.
Right. Because as runaway as that convention was, there was still a modicum of restraint.
At the end of the day, you had people like George Washington and James Madison and
Yeah.
Luther Martin and Roger Sherman and James Wilson and Benjamin Franklin. Nobody that would be at that convention today could hold the jockstrap of any one of those guys.
Right.
When it comes to virtue and knowledge. Nobody. I mean, when I have students say, well, you could go there and we'd be safe. No, you wouldn't. Because it's so much power.
Yeah.
You shouldn't put that kind of power in anybody's hands, particularly today when I don't know many people. I don't know anyone that I would trust to sit there, including myself. And so, because I might have my favorite things too that, well, I'm tinkering with it for the good. Well, they're all going to say that, right?
Right. And especially, today when you talk about the power imbalance, I guess I should say, because we've lived in a society so long that has not been free, that has been corporatism, that has been a cronyism. We haven't had a free market in over 100 years.
Right.
Because all that wealth and all that power, and I don't mean to sound like a total leftist here, but it's true. All that wealth and all that power has been concentrated into a powerful few whose goal is to subjugate the populace.
They will make, you will come out just like they did in 1787. When that gavel sounds that convention closed, you'll have a new form of government and a new constitution. And I do not relish the role of I told you so. Right? I don't want to be the most principled man in the gulag. Right? That doesn't appeal to me. The martyr, I don't have a martyr syndrome. I want us to win, and I want us to win on the front end and win face to face, and we can do this because guess what? We have a 10th Amendment. We
Right.
need the states as creators of the Constitution, as creators of the founding of the federal government, can refuse and have a duty, an obligation, according to Madison and Jefferson and Washington and Hamilton and Franklin and Wilson, right? They have an obligation to refuse to enact or enforce any unconstitutional act of the federal government. Now, the fact that they're not doing it is irrelevant because they can do it. And we could all do that in a year, Mike. All of us have assemblies, state assemblies, and we could all fill that state assembly with people that understand that each one of them, as a requirement for serving as a state legislator, have to swear an oath under Article 6 to support the Constitution. Well, if we enforce that and we get people in there who take oaths to God seriously, who take their own word seriously, then we could literally, in one election, every state could redraw its sovereign borders and say, I don't care if, you're in Arizona, so I don't care if New Mexico wants to enforce all these unconstitutional acts of the feds. We're not doing it here. Guess what would happen? Arizona would become a magnet for freedom-loving individuals. Arizona's economy, the Arizona's atmosphere would be so freedom-loving that it would attract and so what would happen? The concomitant effect would be that Utah would be like, well, we want some of that. Nevada would be like, we want some of that. We don't. Why is Arizona? Arizona's getting it because they're following the Constitution. And so you have these individuals in all these surrounding states and other states, because obviously information is instant now. You'd have, well, why aren't we getting some of that benefit? What's Arizona doing? And you say, well, all they're doing is enforcing the boundaries of the Constitution. And we could all do that. But even the guy who's the president of the Convention of States movement admits it's at least 10 and probably 25 years until they could have a convention. Can you imagine this country in 25 years if nothing is done?
Right.
But he's sitting there saying that he's like, oh, it's a long game and we have to wait. No, we don't, because we could elect legislators today. We could elect legislators in 2024 and rebuild those. And it's a pro-union, it's a pro-constitution, but it's also pro-liberty, because the Constitution as written and ratified does not infringe on your liberty.
Right. And that's the key. I just the other day heard a little tidbit from Michael Bolden at the 10th Amendment Center talk about, the importance of nullification and the importance that the states have to do that, and the duties that they have, because if they don't do it, then that law, those rules, those things become, enforceable for, as you say, 25 years. I mean, how long are we going to deal with tyranny when we could end it right now through just a simple nullification bill?
Yeah. And it's like, we all recognize that the American body politic the tumor of tyranny has developed. We can all agree with that.
Right.
Now, if you went to the doctor and you had a tumor and he diagnosed the tumor, would you prefer him cut it out with a scalpel or with a chainsaw? Obviously the scalpel, right?
Right.
And that's what nullification is. Nullification says some of this is good tissue, some of it's bad. We're going to excise the bad tissue. The COS people just want to take a chainsaw and chop your arm off.
Right.
And tell you it's okay though, right? It'll grow back, right? It won't. And we'll be left without the arm. And then what'll happen? We all know there's going to be that tumor in the left arm. That'll have to be cut off. And pretty soon, we'll be like that guy on Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Come back, you coward,
Right. But and I kind of want to bring it back home a little bit from a standpoint of when, like, what does that mean and what does that look like? I think, for example, right now we're absolutely fighting a proxy war in
Mhm.
Ukraine. We're
Right.
fitting to go to war against Iran.
Mhm.
We've got you know, a bunch of we're playing games with China right
Yep.
now,
Yep.
and and there are still recruitment for the military is down, and there is selective service envelopes going to every 18-year-old
Right.
boy,
Right. That's
you
right.
know, and if a state were to say, you know what, we don't acknowledge the selective service. I mean, I think you can do that on an individual basis at your risk, but if a state were to say, we know we are not going to help the federal government prosecute people who do not turn in their selective service badges,
Yeah.
we are not going to we're just not going to help them do it. They no G-men allowed here. I mean, I think so many people would be like, wait a sec, you mean I don't have to send my son to a foreign war,
No.
being conscripted by an evil empire? I think a lot of people would take notice to something like that.
I think they would too, and I think it builds coalitions that would shock the establishment.
Right.
I saw a meme the other day. It was like, I want to tell your wife I said thank you for the apple butter or whatever, Ezekiel, and the Ezekiel character says, and I want to thank you for the hemp blankets you gave us, Star Child 69. It's like those are the coalitions that would be built.
Right.
And it would shock the establishment to see us lock arms and say, "No, you move," as Captain America said, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not moving, you move. And if
No,
you don't move, we have ways of making you move.
it's so true. I have, my brother who is, an avowed communist. Um, it's wonderful to have a conversation with him where he says, it's interesting that only the communists and the libertarians are anti-war right now. And I
Yep.
said, well, that's because only the communists and the libertarians are principled by nature.
We're the only ones not making dollars off of it.
That's right.
But look, at the end of the day, Mike, the thing that maybe no, not maybe, the thing that I think about most is, and some of your viewers and listeners won't agree, but in my opinion, and I know in yours as well, and many other people, I'm going to have to sit down across the table from Jesus one day. There are going to be two chairs in that room, his and mine. And I won't be able to lie, and I won't be able to be clever. And everything I believe and think will be revealed to him. And I'll be in that place where I'll have to tell the truth. And I don't want to have to find an excuse for my bloodthirstiness. I don't want to say, oh, well, democracy. And he'll be like, no. I don't want to have, you know, and I don't want to have that conversation. I
Right.
believe it's like Hugo Grotius. I know no one's heard of him, but Hugo Grotius, in his book about the rights of war, he writes, don't forget that when anything done in an unjust war is unjust per se itself and must be answered for before the God of the universe, and must be repented of lest you be condemned for it. Now, that's the type of stuff our fathers used to read, our founding fathers read. You know, they took that stuff very seriously. And he says, realize that the commandment is thou shalt not kill. And he says, think about that. Are there justifiable reasons to kill? Yes. But you better make dang sure yours is on that list before you pull that trigger, son. And it doesn't matter what uniform you're wearing. It doesn't matter what you've been told. Shoot that brown person because he hates America, right? I don't know anything more hateful than to shoot someone because he hates you.
Right.
I don't care. Who cares, man? We should be so unconcerned with who doesn't like us. And I'm going to take it back real quick to the John Birch Society. In my conversations with the CEO, Bill Hahn, who is a remarkable man, insightful and foresightful, he said in his official, so he sent me his bulletin. This is a little inside baseball. JBS every month has a bulletin of like what's going on, what action things you should be doing. And it's wonderful because it's like, hey, this thing is going on. Here's a sample script you can use to write a letter to your congressman or your governor or whatever. I mean, that's brilliant. And it's like, contact your local chapter leader if you want to, want help putting something together. If you want to go to your state house and testify at a committee meeting, we can hook that up for you. That's awesome. But Bill Hahn in his December bulletin, he said he sent it to me. He says, "Hey, punch this up. Make sure I got this right." I mean, the CEO of the John Birch Society, and I'm reading it, and he has a whole section in there about, yeah, we're fighting these wars, is proxy wars in Israel and Ukraine, and all these places. Like, we have not learned the lesson about blowback yet? And he has a whole section on that's the John Birch Society, man. The
Well,
John Birch
I will
Society.
say the first place I heard of Ron Paul was from the John Birch Society.
Ron Paul, man. And yeah, when I worked for him, he loved that I wrote for the New American, because it's like, he's like, those are the people that are going to listen to me,
Yeah.
and we should, because anyway, if you're not, the John Birch Society is not one of these people that are going to be like, rah, 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 shoot them all and let God sort them out. That's not constitutional. It's not moral. It's not more. Forget the Constitution. It isn't. Even if the Constitution said, yeah, you can shoot anybody who hates America, that still wouldn't justify you shooting anybody who hates America, because it's immoral. There is a law above positive law, right? And so, to just be honest, I mean, the John Birch Society recognize, and there are many people who have the reputation that they don't. Trust me, they do. You could read the December bulletin if you were a member. If you're a member of the John Birch Society, you'll get that bulletin in the mail or digitally as well, and it'll say, you'll read where he says the founding fathers said this, the Constitution says this, morality says this, and blowback, and so finding that organization, I think a lot of your listeners would be like, okay, I don't agree. For example, you may not agree with their whole immigration stance, for example. You may not agree, and to be honest, they've had me in there having meetings with them, and they're understanding my position and everything, and my position is there's no federal authority for it. And that's worth discussing, because their position is, well, we're being invaded, so there is federal authority for it. And that's a worthwhile discussion, I think. I
Sure.
think that's, you can have scholarly opinions on that both ways, and they entertained that, and they published my article saying that. And the title of the article was, "There is no federal immigration authority." I mean, that's pretty gutsy for an organization to print that maybe feels differently. But you go in there and you think, I don't agree with that. That's fine, man. Who cares? You're going to go in there. If your deal is, I want to end foreign aid, I want to end foreign wars, dude, you're going to find so much material, and you're going to have instant access to things you just couldn't have access to on your own, you know? And I don't see why you wouldn't take advantage of every opportunity to support whatever cause it is that's dearest to your heart. Mine is education as the founders knew it, and state sovereignty. And they let me off the leash, man. And they would let anybody. You get in there and you become a leader, and like I say, there's opportunities to lead, because most people these days are content to follow. So, and there's nothing wrong with that. Lead, follow, or get out of the way, you know. And so if you're a leader, there's leadership opportunities. If you're a follower, there's definitely you'll be able to follow a lot of good people, you know. So it's one of those things. I don't understand the downside, because, it'd be one thing if it was an organization who was like, yeah, if it was a full blown communist organization, right? It's like, yeah, we agree there should be no foreign wars, but we also want the income tax to be 70%, and we want single payer health care, and you know,
Right. Right.
there's no
We
downside.
you know, there's only tyranny and war. You know what I mean? It's like whatever level you're at, whether it's local or foreign, and the best way to minimize that is to try to localize it. And
Yeah, and that's one of the things I like best is they do have a very localized thing. It's very much your chapter will be your neighbors, and you won't have to worry about having a Zoom call with people that you never meet. You'll be, you'll be sitting there with people that it's at someone's house. It's very educational and it offers great tools. And I mean, at the end of the day, we all like to talk about the Sons of Liberty, you know, the Loyal Nine. Those were clubs, man. Those were groups that people belonged to.
right.
And it's not like the John Birch Society gonna put you on blast. It's not like Steve Johnson joined the John Birch Society. Let's, be sure and dox him, everybody. That's not gonna happen,
Yeah,
right? They're
yeah.
not gonna do that. They don't need to do that. And so,
Well,
they,
I agree. I think it's definitely a worthy organization, something for I think anybody who's in the liberty movement, or somebody who thinks education and thinks that learning about history is important. Anybody of that nature, I think it's a worthy cause to look into and
yeah,
consider.
absolutely,
And
absolutely. And they're
and
eh no, go
I was
ahead.
just saying, and the fact that they brought you on and put this position together for you is I think a great sentiment to their commitment to principles and first principles. That being the Constitution and what hopefully can rein in this terrorizing force that we call the federal government.
Well, the Constitution and what's behind it,
Right, the
the
philosophies.
the natural law that undergirds it. And yeah, I mean, you mentioned that. I mean, for example, I remember being down that library, and even in the bulletins and in the New American, and if you go to the New American site, and it's like if your thing is the Federal Reserve, dude, you're gonna have so much material. The Creature of Jekyll Island was first published by the John Birch Society, right? That's who published that book, y'all. And that's the kind of thing you're gonna get if that's your jam, and it should be, you're gonna get you're gonna get so many resources to learn about that, and to
Yeah.
learn more than you know now. If you're one of those guys who think you know everything, then, you probably don't wanna join any organization because no one's gonna wanna be around you. But if you're someone that's willing, and, it's like it reminds me of, Thomas Gordon wrote an essay, at the beginning of his translation of Sallust, the Roman historian Sallust. He wrote an essay at the beginning. He's like, "Look, let's all be honest with each other. People get defensive about their education, and so when you present them with new ideas, most people either A, act like they already knew it, or B, act like it's irrelevant and unimportant, right?" That's what happens because people are jealous of they're defensive of I don't wanna be less educated than that guy. Dude, be less educated sometimes.
Right.
Be less I saw a clip, I don't know if you saw this clip, of it was an old clip of, oh, what's the name of that show? American Idol,
Okay.
and it's when Keith Urban, Jennifer Lopez, and Harry Connick Jr. were the guests, or the what do you call them?
The
The
judges.
judges, there you go. I was like, "Hosts?" That's not the right word. The judges. Well, this girl walks in and she does her little thing, and Harry Connick's like, "Yeah, that's 1,000, no." And Jennifer Lopez and Keith Urban were like, "Oh, that's so amazing." And Harry Connick was like, "You're doing the same 5 notes everybody does, and you're doing them in the way everybody does." And Jennifer Lopez like, "What are you talking about?" And he turns around and schools them on pentatonics, on the scales, on all this stuff, and they're just like, "Why were we never taught this?" He's like, "I don't know."
That's beautiful, man.
And that's the kind of thing. Be humble, man. Be humble. I learn stuff every dang day, and I'm so grateful to be dude, think about it. I have eyes that work to read books. I have a brain that can, um interpret little black scratches on white paper into words and thoughts. That's a blessing, man, because there's so many people in this world who can't read, who can't see, who are born with, defects of the mind and of the brain, and who are born into such impoverishment that reading a book on political philosophy is not something they could ever do. They would ever have time to do. When you're being, when you're having a rope tied to your ankle and you're dangled down in a iridium or whatever it is. What's the thing in Africa? The mine, the,
The
the metal that they use for the iPhones and stuff.
lithium,
Yeah, lithium. You're not going to be pulled back out and handed Sydney.
right?
And that's sad but true. And so to think that we can sit there's with where much is given, much is required. And we've been given an opportunity that we can learn this, but you have to be humble, man. You have to learn to admit what you don't know and try to learn and be humble seeker of the truth. And if you are, man, the instant it's just like a switch is flipped, and there's power that comes to you that would have been denied to you by your pride acting as bouncer.
Right.
you know your pride saying, nope, we know that you don't know it, man, and that's okay. You don't know it. And there's a lot of, and that's what, that's the whole Socrates, the wise man knows how little he knows. And fill in those blanks, man. Fill it in. I love that thing. But if you are one of those people that are admitting, that can admit to not knowing everything and can admit that maybe your education was not as squared away as it ought to have been, then there's no end of good work you can do through your own initiative, through your own efforts to learn and to interpret, to negotiate mentally with your new information and to move forward with it. And if it
Well, and
requires
and
change, well,
the journey up the mountain gets more and more glorious the higher you go. The more you're able to, um, I find, I consider myself, mostly self-educated,
mhm.
when it comes to this kind of stuff for sure. And, the, like, it's true. It's rare air as you climb that mountain. And, it's exciting, the journey becomes so exciting because um, you realize how, as an artist, I can see like how things intertwine, and philosophy and mathematics and religion and all these things ends up becoming, that one great thing that we can look at and go, man, we can live in harmony. And this isn't like some utopian, BS of like,
Mm, mm-mm.
what we're talking about is being able to live free and live together and communicate and prosper with one another, without the need of some unholy hand just pushing down on everything. Because we don't even, because we've swam in these waters for so long, we have no idea how hard we've been pushed down. And it's exciting to when you start to realize these kind of things.
Yeah, and you literally, in the state of liberty, you can get what you want.
Yeah.
Where it becomes coercion, you making someone else want what you want, that's the problem. People say you can't always get what you want. You absolutely can. You absolutely can, in a state of liberty, get what you want. You're just not allowed to force someone else to want what you want.
Mhm.
And I think, and I talk to, people that are very, very, very far left, and I'm like, yeah, I could live in a society, in a state that the two of us live in, conjoining states, because I don't want your laws, but I'm fine trading with you, and I'm fine agreeing not to steal from each other, not to kill each other, not to
Right.
force our ideas on each other, and live peacefully. Guys, it really honestly does work. But we
Okay.
have
So
to get rid of those who insist on, my idea is so good, I'm gonna force you to do it.
Okay, so I have a this has been a conspiracy theory that I've been like mulling in my brain. I want to like
Okay.
I'm throwing this out there, so feel free to totally. But here's one of my educational conspiracy theories. You
Okay.
know, when we talk about classical education, I know you love the Greeks and the Romans and all that.
Yeah.
I know you do. But here's my theory: the reason we learn from the reason we base our systems and our education on them is because for the most part, they are kind of a pro state. Let me give you an example. We never talk about like the German tribes that lived in peace. The Romans talked about them, you know, but it's kind of the same thing that you mentioned before. The sound of freedom is silence. You know, there aren't great records of the warlords of the Germanic tribes and of the Celtic tribes and things like that or the Native American tribes and here. It's as if this there's a one of the reasons why we learn about great Greek and Roman things is because they become great states. Now, I don't know what's causation and what is, what
Right.
chicken and egg kind of a thing. But anyway, that's my
No,
theory I'm throwing out there.
well, one of the things is, and yes, for the many people will say, "Oh, I don't read Sallust because he's pro empire. I don't read Tacitus because he's pro empire." Who cares? Because at the end of the day, Tacitus does write a whole book about the German tribes and how amazing they are. Now, let's say, for example, let's say this. Let's say Tacitus says, there's this German tribe, and they're so ridiculous that they believe that you shouldn't go to war unless it's absolute. That's ridiculous. They believe you shouldn't conquer anyone. And if Tacitus says, isn't that stupid? Well, that may be Tacitus' opinion, but you could read that and be like, no, that's awesome. Who cares? You negotiate with the text. Tacitus is just the communicator. And so it's like when I'm reading, something like Isocrates, and he has an essay called, well, sometimes they interpret it as, they translate it as On the Peace, like Peace, but the real title is On the Confederacy. Now, but if you say On the Confederacy, people are like, that's about the Civil War. I ain't gonna read that. Traitors, pure slavery. It's like, but it's called On the Confederacy. But you'll find if you Googled Isocrates on the Peace, it's the best thing you'll read today, hands down. Outside of Holy Writ, it is the best thing you'll read today. And whether you agree with Isocrates' take on it, his observations provide you an opportunity to see how the ancients recognized these certain situations. Like when he talks about, well, when there's a confederacy of sovereigns, then the government of the confederacy has no authority if it ever acts in contravention of the benefit of one of the component sovereignties. Um, I mean, let's take that and put it in. Let's teach that to
Right.
some first graders instead of, what's your pronoun, right? But think of how they do it, Mike. They poison the well. There's all that delicious water, but they come along and say, Confederacy means pro slavery. Plunk,
Right.
drop the poison in that well. So when you hear the word Confederacy, you're like, whoop, nope, doesn't apply to the United States. Guess what, Slick? Federalist 39 says we are a Confederacy. I don't know what to tell you. Why did the Confederate States of America call themselves the Confederate? Why is it the Articles of Confederation? Right?
Yeah.
Why is Federalist 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47? Why do they all mention that? Because that's what's true. Right? But we're not taught that. Right? We're
Right.
not taught that stuff. We're not taught that. But
And
we
that's
can. But now we have no excuse, mate. We have no excuse now not to be taught because freaking piece of glass that we carry around in our pocket, I can dial up Federalist 39 in a second. Now, whether I read it or not, watch. I mean, I'm just going to dial it up just for an example. Federalist, I'm going to spell it wrong, but Google will correct me.
You don't even have to know how to spell, man. That's
Federalist 39. Look at that. Right there. There you go. In English, available essentially for free. And what does it say? It says, this Constitution, if approved, will form a confederacy of sovereign states, not a national government. I don't have to give my opinion because little Jimmy Madison just gave it.
that's right. That's right.
And guess what? You can argue with him all you want, but I got a clip full of bullets like this.
Right. Right. If
And
you want to
but
build a
we're
case,
never
man.
going to be taught that, dude. But you know what? Who freaking cares? I'm not saying don't ever watch fail videos. Heaven knows I watch my share. Right? I love to see somebody slip on the ice and hurt themselves. But I spend way more time reading this because I see it. Yes, I get joy out of it, right? People make fun of me because on my to-do list every day I say something like pleasure reading. And so my friend who was spending the night, he's like, "What's your pleasure reading for today?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm reading this pamphlet that Sydney wrote as a political pamphlet." He's like, "But that's what you do for work." And I'm like, "Dude, I'm sorry, I love it." But maybe you don't, and that's cool. But maybe you say to yourself, like book club, you and I belong to book club.
Right.
We're studying Plutarch. Man, we do that an hour a week. Dude, that's way less than we should, but way more than most people.
Right.
And
No,
that feels
and
good. It feels good at
it
the end of
feels
it to
good,
say,
and
"Dude, I just studied Plutarch for an hour."
the benefits are just of that hour just outweigh any kind of cost, you know?
Right, because you don't know. I'm talking to you, listener, watcher, whatever, viewer. You have no idea, A, who Plutarch is, B, what he wrote, and C, why it should matter to you. And guess what? Guess why you don't know that? Because the education gatekeepers don't want you to know. And that right there should be enough of an inspiration for you to go find out. The fact that someone in a suit in DC says, I don't want some kid in Arizona to know who Plutarch is, that should be enough to fire you up to get you to read Plutarch. That should be enough. That should be enough. The
Yep.
fact that somebody,
Come on,
anybody,
Punk Rocket, go look it up.
exactly, you know, up up the establishment, right? The fact that somebody is stiff arming you should be enough for you to say, I want to read that thing, if for no other reason than to make that dude in that suit angry.
Yep.
To show him that he's not the boss of me. I'm not listening. I'm not gonna listen to what you tell me to read when I got this piece of glass in my pocket where I can read that stuff.
Yep.
Google it. I challenge you. Go right now. Write a little list for yourself. I listened to Mike today. I heard someone mention Federalist 39. Dude, it'll take you 10 minutes to read it. And I heard Plutarch. Just read one of dude, spend an hour today reading that stuff. And you don't know, that might be the hour that you're like, Dad gum, everything I've ever been taught is a lie. But wouldn't you rather know that than to go persist on in your life decade after decade, not only believing, but perpetuating a lie?
Yep.
Come
Most
on, man.
You've got to step up. Joey,
What?
where can people find these amazing wisdom tidbits from the master? From
I don't know, from the master in the Bible. From
right?
me, you can find it from the master in the Bible. But from me, you can find, well, I'm going to say honestly, you can find words of the master in the Book of Mormon too.
Right.
But you can find my stuff. I think the easiest place to go would be my YouTube channel, Teacher of Liberty. I think if you go to my TikTok channel, I think it's Joe Wolverton 2, like the number 2. I think those are the two places I would send you to for a basic education. But if you're at that point where you want to start actually not just consuming liberty, but working on behalf of liberty, I would go to jbs.org, JB like boy, S like Sam.org, jbs.org, thenewamerican.com. And sign up, dude. Sign up. It's very cheap, but you'll get so much out of it. And I would love to see there be 100 new people a day so we can get this thing done. And like I say, at the end of the day, we can all sit when we've won, and when there's gallows after gallows of tyrants twitching at the end of a rope, then once we've tossed their bodies into the sea, then we can sit down and talk peacefully about our differences. But right now, let's focus on the things we have in common and finally, once and for all, act boldly for liberty, lest there come a day when we forget the glorious and charming sound. Mike is gone.
You are listening to And If Love Remains.
Gone but not forgotten.
First of 23 installments requested by Dr. Levitt. Trying to be in compliance here because we're taking him and that whole organization